Good evening. I have 7 o'clock, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. This being a workshop, we'll just go through the agenda. First issue on the agenda is short-term rentals. I think Ms. Paula Downs has a presentation for us, and then we'll discuss this issue.
Good evening. In your packets tonight, you have a memo that I created. Just wanted to start by saying that during the previous workshop, you asked several questions, asked if we could do certain things, and also asked me to do some research for other cities in the community, in the state, which I did. It turns out that almost everything you all mentioned is probably in somebody else's code or program across the state. For example, should we limit the ability for somebody to come in and buy 50 properties and turn them all into short-term rentals? Yes, a lot of communities do have limitations on how many short-term rental properties somebody can own, a single owner. You also asked, for example, could we restrict short-term rental density? In other words, only so many in a neighborhood, or maybe there have to be 1,000 feet apart, or whatever that is. Yes. So what I found is most of what we were talking about, suggestions that you were all making, after I started searching through all of the communities across the state, and I ran out of them having different options, I realized that maybe I had met the end of that road related, at least what we do in Kansas. Nationally, there's a whole bunch of other things that are going on specialty, but in Kansas, it's pretty consistent. So what I did was I just put together this memo, and it's a way to provide a summary of some of the options or some of the considerations that communities are looking at. So there's basically 8 main headings, and they fell into these basic categories. I just gave you examples so that you could see what other communities were sort of talking about. And so the initial, I think, that we didn't reach a conclusion last time during the last workshop was, do we as a city want to create a short-term rental program? And if we do, as you can see in the memo, I put in that a lot of the communities are split on if they also include all rental properties, not just short-term. So a lot of them permit and or license anybody who has a rental property of any type. They don't distinguish between short-term or long-term permanent rentals. Some of them do. Some of them only do short-term and don't do anything with rentals. So that's across the board was the most unique comment or thing in a program, is to decide, do you want to include all rentals or just short-term rental, and how you want to include them. Typically, though, short-term rental is obviously becoming a very popular thing to discuss. And so I wanted you to know all the options that I had run into, and these are just main topics. I don't know that we need to or are asking you to decide every single detail about a program, but I wanted to provide you the options to say, we really don't want to touch that. We do want to maybe explore that. We can do this a couple, 3 ways maybe. One, we can decide and give staff the go-ahead to, even if we want to do this in the first place, and if we do, I can create a program that includes the language with all the options, and it becomes a menu that we can continue to refine. Or we can look at some of the options and say, I really don't want to discuss this and don't even think about putting it in. And then maybe give some direction related to what type of rental properties we want to include in this kind of a program. I'm happy to talk about any of the options, provide expanded explanation about what some of these options are. If there's anything that's troubling you, I can respond to that. So I'm here to go through however you want to handle reviewing this, and we can reflect back on some of the issues that you had from the first session if you'd want to do that also.
Okay, well, I have a couple of comments. Just that looks like in your presentation that you had distributed to the council members, it was more like a drop-down menu of selections. Okay,
correct.
So just to respond to that, just my personal opinion, and council is certainly welcome to provide theirs as well. The types, I think it'd be an administrative permit specific to short-term rentals, requiring an application and fee. And I would limit it to the single family or 2 family zones, and requiring notification to neighbors. That's on the initial application. I do think there should be some sort of a renewal, whether that's every other year or every year. I don't have a design on what that has to be. Obviously, it does need a business life permit license, but that could be combined to a short-term rental license. That would be a fine. But I don't want these going to planning commission. I think that they should be things we could do administratively. I just think we don't need to overburden planning commission with it. But I do think it is important that we do set some limits. Is what's the right number of people, and if we wanted to say that ourselves, or we want to get some help from the fire marshal and see what their recommendations are, that would be fine. But I do think there also needs a part of your parking plan in every case. You can't just have 50 cars out there in somebody's neighborhood. That's just not reasonable. Even 5 cars is a problem. Okay, so they need to have a parking plan that is approved. I think that would be important. Beyond that, I don't have a lot of other issues there, other than they need to communicate with their renters, whoever they are, what the rules are, because you can't be having parties or whatever. I mean, you have to be careful about what you're saying there about parties, but
Gatherings.
I'm sorry?
Large gatherings.
Large gathering, yes, really what I meant. I mean, if you just have a party of the people that are staying there, that's obviously we're not ever going to say anything about that. But if you have 50 or 100 people show up, that's a problem. So yeah, those are really my only comments about it. But of course, what the council members speak about as well. So.
I can say, Mayor, too, that most of the communities do have some program of some sort related to short-term rentals. There are very few communities that are relying, like we are, on the special use process. So I think most of the communities have created the program in an administrative way to avoid having to file a full zoning case and go before Plan Commission and City Council for approval. So I think that that's kind of how that all got started. But yeah, we're one of few in the state that actually utilize the special use program. Topeka is the other one. So I don't know how long before they change their mind, but Topeka has also got a special use requirement. So it's interesting.
I was just going to jump in. Maybe one thing that stood out to me was I don't want to have anything like a map or a registry listed on the website indicating where these are at. And then one thing that I would be interested to hear the rest of council's opinion on is if we were interested in that. I'm not even sure how I feel about the Alexandria, Virginia's model of $10,000 or less, kind of having a free registration if it's sort of a one-off thing you do throughout the year.
Yeah, it was probably a very unique situation, but one that had not been in Kansas. And the reason why we included it is because I believe it was you and maybe the mayor who sent me the Airbnb toolkit and that was one of the examples that were in there. So I wanted to respond. The other examples that they stated were already options that a lot of the Kansas communities are already using. That was the outlier. So I included that in as an additional consideration because I knew you guys had seen that before. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, that's something I noted in here as well. I like the option from Alexandria. And then in your occupancy 1B, allowing a specified number of days each year for rental without requiring a permit or license. One thing else that I had a comment on, licensing and permitting. I do believe we should only include short-term rentals in this. Long-term rentals are basically the same as somebody owning the home, just it's a neighbor who's renting. I don't know. I don't see the big advantage to having both a permit and a license requirement. Is there?
So the way it was distinguished in most of the programs I reviewed were the license was a business license because they are getting income from the business at that home. So it was a business license, and then the permit allowed the use. So what they were doing was substituting the requirement to file a zoning case, creating a permit administratively, but also following their general business requirements in their codes that says if you have a business, and this is how it's defined, then you have to have a business license. So that's where the permit license language came in. And it was usually two separate things, one application, and fees were appropriately assessed. So
I see.
that's what it was.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
One other question. What happens if we, actually, I think you've already answered this. If we do nothing, then we continue to rely on planning and zoning.
Currently, that's what the code requires. So in the absence of creating something different, that would be the only way forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll go ahead and add on. So I'll just state this, I'm not in favor of staying where we're at because I don't think it's super clear to both sides, to be
Sure.
fair, to property
Sure.
owners that both own a home next to a short-term rental and people that own a home that they're using as a short-term rental. I think it's unfair the way the current thing is set up. So I do think we need a specific code for short-term rental. I think a lot of the suggestions seem fine. A lot of the things that Mayor said, I tend to agree with. One of the things I think I keyed in on when I did a lot of research on this was the occupancy piece. If you put some sort of parameters around that, and I don't know that I know the magic number, a lot of the numbers I was seeing was 2 per bedroom, max of 10. That tends to take care of a lot of the issues that you have with short-term rentals, especially larger ones, because you don't have as many cars coming. If you limit the number, it ends up being more of a family size appropriate to the home, that sort of thing for neighborhood, so that we're not impeding on other people's property rights that are living and expecting to live in a neighborhood. So that's one I think we should key in on, especially if we're not going to go through planning and zoning. I think we need to have those details figured out. If we're going to rely on it being an administrative process, I'd like to have those fine-tuned, those sort of requirements. The density one is also one I think people talked about the most, other than the occupancy, was the density. There are obviously parts of our country that are more of a tourist destination. So some neighborhoods are basically short-term rentals. And then there are other parts of our country that aren't as much of a tourist destination, but there might be some business, happening and people using these as more of a longer term option for travel and business reasons. So I think that relying it on as administrative is fine. So long as we have those details figured out, we can all agree to those, and we're not bypassing any ability for neighbors to have input. And I think there was still some sort of a notification process as part of that, because I think that the neighborhoods, deserve a right. Neighbors next door deserve a right to have, comments, just like we've had on cases, right? So I don't want that to get lost in this, but I agree. I would hate for it to go to the planning commission over and over. It would be nice to just set a policy, agree on a policy, and then staff would understand how we want to see that handled. Other than those items and what I've said, I think that it'd be nice for it to not be overly cumbersome. I think there's a lot of good suggestions in here. I don't know that we need some random exceptions. I think we should just come up with a policy that's pretty clear and pretty concise and just stick to it. Especially if we're going to make it an administrative deal. If it's not going to be more case by case, I'd like to see it just be very clear. So I am actually not in favor of the one-off Alexandria. If you're under 10,000, you can use it for a few days. I think you either get a short-term license or you don't. And that allows you to operate it as a short-term rental. It's just kind of my 2 cents. But otherwise, love the research. I did a lot of my independent research that uncovered some of the same things. But I appreciate you taking the time to go through it and give us all those options. Thank you.
Mr. Director?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Paula, I guess I was just wondering, what I understand it goes before zoning, they get their license, but what are we accomplishing by having a permitting and a licensing process, or what problems are we solving or mitigating with where we're at today?
So where we are at today, this was we became and started talking about it because we received a complaint about a specific short-term rental in the community, which started asking a lot of questions of ourselves about what do we have to do. And as I've said before, and so thank you for the question, is that in every parcel in our city, of course, belongs to a zoning district. That zoning district has permitted uses by right, which means you can use it for those permitted uses and you don't have to do anything. We also have a list of conditional uses. And if they're not listed on the conditional uses, then we have a special use case process in the code that allows us to do that. In this particular case, not all of our zoning districts allow for short-term rentals, even on a conditional use or by permitted. No permitted, no conditional. So you have to do a special. Special use is treated exactly like conditional use because we have to resolve the use of every parcel. It's not just single family, two family, multifamily. It's how can you use that single family, that two family, that multifamily. So we have things like on the conditional use that would be, you can use this as a, it could be you could use that property for a park, even though it says it's a single family platted zoning district. It says single family residence. You can use it as a park. You can use it as a church. You can use it as, some of them have businesses that you can use, home businesses. Could be a small office. It could be some kind of business.
Daycare is probably
Daycares is
one
the
of the
biggest
biggest ones we
ones,
hear.
right? You can use that as a daycare or you can't. So if you can't, then you have to follow the other mechanisms in place in the code. So we realized pretty quickly during that discussion, it is pretty cumbersome for somebody to have to file a special use case, a conditional use case in order to operate a short-term rental. And so we started having the conversations about how can we resolve that? And the way I can resolve that is either create and change codes, or we have to continue to follow the code that we have, which is special use and it's too cumbersome. So I think there was some consensus that says, how can we simplify it? How can we make it administrative? And how can we make it clear? And that's where we are today.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in favor for streamlining this space as much as we can to cut down on city staff efforts and uses, especially different council times. Be great.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. David.
the only thing I'll add is, yeah, I liked all that, the parking occupancy. The only thing I'll agree with Councilmember Dean that we should be no exceptions, just here's the method.
Okay.
Paula, and for the group, let's go through the neighbor notification, just the different bullets. We kind of want to judge the council. How do we want to go through that process, or what's your vision on that? Because I think that's probably, with the complaints we've heard, probably one of the more important ways we're going to have to work this new administrative order.
I think on initial application, you need to have a neighborhood notification. I don't think you need to do it on any renewal. And that could probably be a meeting that you just call here at the city hall with Paula chairing the meeting. I don't think it needs to be a planning commission type of thing. Doesn't need to be a big public meeting. If you get a lot of pushback, obviously, then you might have to go to a planning commission or city council for it. But I think it's mostly a notification to say, hey, we got this application. Here's the parameters of the application. Here's what's coming, so that they're not surprised when it happens.
Yeah, I think there was a few options in there that typically with any zoning case or any other kind of case that we go through planning and zoning, we ask and this is a really good point, so thank you for bringing that up. This is a really good point because typically what they have to do is they have to go to an abstract title company, get an ownership list of all properties within 200 feet environment. That list is costly to get all of that
Yeah,
neighborhood.
it can cost you $500 or $600.
It does. And then they supply that to us and we send out a certified letter letting them know that we're having a public hearing, or in this case, it could be an administrative hearing if they want to speak, or they can submit written documents. So, because when we have those kinds of, and in these examples, these are public hearings. So the public hearing, right, some of them have protest petition. So as you can see, like 50% or more of the owners are in the surrounding areas say we don't want it, then administratively they shut it down. They can't do it. And then they have to file another method, or they can, I can't remember what this one was specifically. They can go to planning commission and city council like they would another if they don't agree with that. And so if we're going to streamline it, I would say that Obviously, we have access to pull the 200 feet environ owners of properties because it's listed publicly on GIS. That's an easy enough list to put together. We can ask for either written comments, or they can come and speak with me at a designated time and hear complaints. And then we are sort of, what do I do with it? Right? So then 14 neighbors or 15 neighbors show up and they don't like it, then there's got to be something in the process that says, is there a percentage of people that if they complain or they don't like it, then what do I do? So it's not subjective, right?
Follow.
Or go ahead.
So follow up to that. So how
Yeah.
does this, so the notification piece, I've read those 4 bullets. I think it's under 5,
It is.
number 5. How does that compare with a regular zoning case? Like, isn't there a normal notification process that follows? Is this almost exactly the same, or is it slightly different?
The examples that I pulled are almost identical.
So
Get-
we could make ours match what our normal zoning process
Right.
would, where properties would have to be notified if there's a zoning
Correct.
case.
It's how we get the list of
Sure,
owners is
sure.
the complexity or the cost. Yeah.
I think I'd be in favor of trying to not reinvent the wheel and not try to do more than what we would do normally. I realize we're trying to simplify it. So I'd like us to, I would assume, I won't speak for everybody, that we follow a very similar process to what we would do with the zoning case. Almost identical numbers. The number, obviously, it's going to be different is what do we think that a written protest level needs to get to just tell you, hey, if it reaches this number, you're shutting it down. That would make it so that you're not making that call. Although I will say there might be cases, and this is going to be a follow-up question for you, is the BZA ever going to be involved? If something were to go to a point where somebody protested your decision, would the BZA have to get involved? I'm just kind of speaking out loud at that question, but I would be in favor of trying to streamline it, almost identically to what we do with the zoning case, but mirror that, but make it an administrative process.
And I can review, Mayor, what the ownership list possibly could look like. I can also kind of think about what the protest either level is or process is, and then put on the end what happens if they don't like what I decide and what's that next step. Because there's always a next step. Like, I'm not the
Sure.
all-encompassing final rule. So you can see that they would be considered at the planning commission. So we would follow a different process at that point related to that, which would be an administrative exception. So-
One final thing I'll say, and you put it at the end of this, so I'm glad you did, because it came up in my research too. We're talking about city regulation. If HOAs want to regulate this at a higher level, that is their prerogative, and that is their
Absolutely can.
membership's prerogative, and
They
that's
absolutely
any HOA has that right. So I would be in favor of, like I said, making ours as clean and simple and no exceptions, and let HOAs decide if they want to, make it more stringent. That's sort of on them in my.
Yeah, I got clarification.
The only caution I'd put on the HOA thing is the city is not going to get in the business of enforcing HOA
No, I don't
policies.
disagree with
That's
that.
HOA does that, and we don't.
That's their
we don't-
prerogative.
We don't step over that line.
Yep.
Okay.
No, I don't disagree. We're talking about city regulation. That's why I was being clear.
Correct.
We're talking about city regulation.
That's right.
HOAs
HOA
can do
covenants
their own.
can legally be more restrictive. They can't be less restrictive than our code. Yes, you're absolutely right.
But thanks for putting that in there, because
Sure.
I've said that before, even before we got to this point.
Sure.
But I also saw it come up a lot in the research was some HOAs have just said, nope, we're not having it. And their membership voted, they passed bylaws, and they said, we're not having short-term rentals.
That's right.
But I get to enforce that would be on the HOA
That's their
to deal
correct.
with legally. So
Correct.
That's was on my list too. I know HOAs get a bad rap, but I like HOAs because you get even more control. You can figure out what's right for your area. Is there any concern you have where, let's say a neighborhood bans HOAs, there's no legal, or bans HOAs, bans rental. Some people want to ban HOAs, but bans
Bans
short-term
it.
rentals. Do they, have there been any issues where people say they have that right? There's no legal pushback that would hold up that they'd say,
Well, what I found was interesting in that information was they can be more restrictive. They just can't say, do whatever you want in spite of what the city code says, right? So I came across where a lot of the language in the program says the HOA also has the right to be more restrictive. So look at your covenants before deciding to open a business. So that was actually showed up in the city programs. There's HOAs that say you can't have a business. This might be considered a business under their codes. You can't have short-term rentals at all in our covenants. Don't expect to get it here, right? Unless they have some other process where they can say, can you make an exception? But then, of course, once you make the exception, then all the exceptions coming in. Yeah, the HOAs across the state are more restrictive in many ways. They just can't be less than whatever the city code is. And the city code usually references that the HOA can be more restrictive and that you probably should look at your covenants before you commit.
I really like that. And I like that it gives power and we're not making such a broad, restrictive decision at this level. So like was brought up, the feedback I've received from residents are issues like the noise. We can address the parking plan. And this might be where I want to hear from Chief about, in terms of like your good neighbor policies and things like that. Maybe talk about the noise issue that would apply to anybody, not just short-term rentals. And are we already covered with kind of what we're going to touch on later? I have to wait. I can't hear it now. Okay.
Can't ask right now.
Can't ask it right now. Okay.
Yeah, and a lot of the programs also set up as we were writing codes, because these are coming through codes, right? Not just, I'm calling it a program because it's something different, but it really is a code. And they do put in there some additional tools in that code that gives the police department other authority, right? So if we have a noise code, some of the short-term rentals say you can't, no noise between 10 and 7 a.m. or 10 and 8 p.m. And then that would be part of our code that is enforceable, right? So
that applies to everybody.
That would apply to everybody. Yeah. So we have to think about what those clear expectations are related to the good neighbor, right? Policies. But I liked some of those in the sense of make sure that you have enough trash, make sure it's getting picked up, right? There's some nuances there that we want to try to tidy up as much as we possibly can. Now, I can't say that we can predict the creativity a short-term rental property owner might have outside of the code. So it could be a little bit, it's going to be learning, right? But we could probably keep up on modifying it as we need to. Yeah, and updating it so that when they get really creative, we can address what we need to address if it comes up.
That's why I'm actually not in favor of any exception. We just need to make it clear and concise and no exceptions, because I could see that getting loopholed and creative. So
creative
and a burden administratively.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I was going to say. This has to be complaint driven. I don't want you, once we figure out the streamlined process. So that brings me to the issue of your thoughts. And do we want to have a 3 strikes and you're out policy or 3 strikes and you're in timeout
I see what you're saying.
issue?
Yeah, I think those were put into place because just like any other property that might experience an elevated number of code complaints, there may be another way to address that in our code. So we'll get a call from a neighbor that says, oh, they had a gathering last night and there's trash all over the front yard and in the street or whatever, and they won't clean it up. They're not mowing their yards. It would be a code violation in a more traditional sense, not targeted necessarily because it's a short-term rental, but in general, if we have a complaint. So, but the code enforcement piece works a little different, right? They get a notification letter of a code violation, which says you can't do something. But if it's not in our code, it's really hard to enforce. So I'll have to look at if there's something that needs to be put in to the code for a short-term rental outside of just the general code violations, because they get a letter, they get a second letter, and then we have to do something. We have to cite them. They have to go to municipal court or whatever. So I think that maybe that community might have had a creative property owner that was misbehaving. And that's why they said, if you do that, it was tied to a license. They revoked the license, and you can't have another one for 2 years. And then we'll review it at that point. And I think that's why they put that in there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because there are going to be properties that could potentially be problem children, and you do want to have some ability to take your enforcement action.
Absolutely.
The last thing I'll say, or question to follow up on Emily's, if we do move forward with the policy, what's the step that we take to notify all known? Is there a letter that goes out and, hey, we're giving you a grace period of 6 months. You either have to choose to close down your operation, or here is our process. Please kindly, apply, and then like at this day, we'll start taking enforcement action on ones that have not, or ones that have that are not following the regulation.
That would make the most sense. I feel like they're not, we don't want to start this process off as like, this is bad, this is bad. It's just,
Adversarial, yeah.
you don't know what you don't know. So here's the letter saying we've either got this new program, this code, these are the expectations. I can send them the code verbatim, right? Give them the applications or tell them where to go, and give them a reasonable amount of time to gather their thoughts, gather their information, and make the application. But yes, we will, just like any other, have to put some sort of deadline for compliance, because that's what we're really after here. The ones that we know about publicly will be informed, and we'll keep track with them and we'll work with them. And if it becomes a burden, then we'll have to follow another process to make sure that they get in compliance. And I think that when we heard from the previous, when the complainant was here last time and the neighbors were here last time, I think they were all saying, we're fine to follow some sort of regulations. We're not opposed to that. And I think that streamlining it in the way that you all are suggesting tonight makes it much easier for them to do that. And we're trying to make it valuable to the city, but also not cumbersome to the community. And so we'll continue to refine that policy until we all feel comfortable with it, and then we can move forward. And then, yes, I will reach out and be working with each of those property owners.
Oh, that sounds good. And I would agree with you. I heard the same thing, either in the meeting and out, that folks are fine with having a regulation, so long as we have something that's clear and concise and all that stuff. So, thanks.
Last thing I'll say on my list, and like you said, we don't have to make this for every contingency that may ever happen in the future. But one of the gentlemen here back in October talked about, we don't have any hotels. We have some that are very close, but we don't in Bel Aire yet. But I suspect there will be before too long, maybe along 254 or something like that. And so what about the occupancy tax? Do you feel like we're not there yet? If we get a hotel, we can talk about leveling the playing field, or should we do it? Is now the time to do it?
I think that most of across the state, how short-term rentals are being handled right now is they do pay a transient guest tax. It goes to the state, and then it's reimbursed to the city. And we have record of receiving those taxes. We don't know individually which properties are paying those. We don't have hotels, right? So a lot of it's going to be assuming that there are short-term rental properties paying some. It's not a huge amount. If we ever had hotels in the city, then we would have to look at what that taxing structure would be required to under state law, and then what we want to do here. But transient guest tax is what's most similarly attached to these short-term rentals, and it appears that they are paying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Based on what you're just already receiving now.
Based on what we're receiving now, right?
Paula, one question, and Emily actually brought it up. You kind of jogged my memory. As far as having a registry or list, I'm not necessarily in favor of that. I think it's easy for consumers to be savvy and jump on Airbnb or VRBO and scope out, are there short-term rentals in my neighborhood? But why would, in your research, what did you see? What was the reasoning behind the city? Were they just wanting to be transparent with consumers? What was the driving force behind cities
think-
having that kind of thing on their website?
Oh, on their website. Yes, thank you. Great question. I think most of it was they're a business. And right now, for example, in planning and zoning, we had previously on the website for many years put a list of all the licensed contractors in the city of Bel Aire. Class A, Class B, plumbers, electricians. And so this was another business. So I think they were posting it, one, because they were a business license and it's a public business. And the other one, I think they wanted people to know where the short-term rentals were located in their city. So it's not every city has done that, but some of the, and quite frankly, I looked at Derby's and they only have 15 properties listed on their website about where those short-term rentals are. I like the other side of it more so. I think what's more helpful to city staff is that we actually have the application information, because what is happening sometimes are the owners live in Florida, California, and the only owner information we have is an address. So I could, if they had any kind of violations, I could send letters all day long. But if I can't call them or find them, they're never going to respond. But they're responsible ultimately for whatever the code violations are. And so having this application and knowing who the owners are, there's a lot of, almost everybody has a requirement for them to be available within a certain period of time. You have to respond within 30 minutes or an hour, or you have to live within the area to get there to respond to concerns.
Or have a designee.
So that's
somebody
helpful. So if you're not here and you live in Florida, please tell me who your local agent is so that if we have issues, the police department has issues, we have somebody to contact. And right now, we would never know that. And that's what happens with, on the other side of it, not just short-term rentals, rental properties. And we have a lot of problems, right, with people not wanting to take care of their homes here, and they live in Florida, and the homeowner does not want to tell us how to reach the owner, because if they do, they might get in trouble and then they get evicted. So how do we find somebody who's in Florida? So, right. So that's why I think so many other communities have included rental properties as a general statement, so that at least we know from a code enforcement police action thing that we know where to find a property owner, or at least an agent of that property owner that can respond to problems here in town. So right now, we don't have that. We're hoping that the owners we can find somehow, or they respond, but that's not always what happens. So I think that's how that got started.
Thank you.
I think it would be fine to update code where the renter property owners who are doing rentals that are not local have a local resident agent, but I don't think I want to mix that with this issue. Okay, I'd like it personally. I'd like it to be separate. I think it would make more sense that way. So, and I do think the appeal process on this needs to be the Board of Zoning Appeals. So that's just probably what you were going to do, but just thought I'd say that.
Just a counter to that, though, I think a lot of the complaints do have to do with not being able to contact somebody to deal with the problem. So I almost feel like it needs to be dealt with. I'm curious what you found, or if anybody else has experience with the sort of Airbnb or the third party having a 24-hour line you can call. Has anybody ever do you find anything in your research about how helpful those actually are?
Well, they required it twofold. So not only do we know, but they have to post it. That's part of the good neighbor policies, where they're having to post that in the unit. And so I'm guessing that if the person who's staying in the unit can't reach him within 30 minutes, they're probably going to be calling the city to say, something's happening, we can't get a hold of, right? And so, because we don't have the process in place, no. I'm guessing that's why they're included in a lot of the programs across the state, is because we don't know who is there. We don't know who to contact. We don't know. And neither would they unless we required them to put it in the unit. A lot of them require them to put the license in the unit to say, I'm licensed, because there's something that goes along with that licensing requirement that tells the person who's renting the house, yes, I'm doing what I need to do in the city. If you have concerns, here are the rules, et cetera, et cetera. So I bet 90% of the programs include these good neighbor policies to assist not only the person renting, but the city who's probably going to get called, either the police or the general city hall, about some problem there.
When I was thinking the neighbor next door that has an issue. So, okay.
Okay. If there are any more questions for Paula at this time, if not, I want to see if there's any citizens. I see a lot of citizens here. I want to see if any of the citizens would like to speak on this issue. And if not, that's fine. But if there are, I'd like to ask you to come to the podium, state your name and address, and I can give you 3 minutes to speak.
I just have my name is Ruth Thiessen. I live at 6819 East Central Park Avenue. And I just have a couple questions and comments. So first, Emily, you just asked about Airbnb help. I do not live next to an Airbnb, but I have heard from other neighbors in the Central Park neighborhood that they have called Airbnb and they have been less than helpful, especially since there's no back and forth. They can say, hey, can you tell the owner this? But then there's no
You have no
guarantee of
idea
ever
what actually
hearing back.
happened.
And yes, also one of my questions would be, how are the neighbors, are the neighbors expected to just call the police if there is an issue, or would they have access somehow to those local agents to call if there is an issue? And what would that look like to make sure that they know how to contact them? Because I know that was one of the things that came up in the Central Park neighborhood when there were issues, was one neighbor said, well, I live next door to this, but I have no idea how to get a hold of the owner. And I think having that would have resolved some of the issues And then I guess my only other question was, as far as density, I know in Central Park, we currently have 2 Airbnbs that are back to back. So if there's a code that gets put in place, if there's a density thing saying we don't want them that close, who decides which one gets to be it, if that makes sense? So I just wanted to make sure to highlight that question. So thank you all for your work on this, especially to Paula.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other citizens who'd like to speak? Yes, sir.
My name's Barry Craig, live at 5140 North Colonial Avenue. I think there's a couple things that either I'm missing from the October meeting. There were a couple former council members that are no longer with us that brought up the question, do we even want short-term rentals in Bel Aire? From what I'm gathering just by listening, it's been decided that we do. I mean, is that a fair assessment?
Well, the council has not voted on it one way or the other. So
Okay,
to say,
so-
you could probably say by consensus, it sounds like that's okay. I understand what you're saying. but yeah, there's
I
been no
mean,
formal
that-
action.
To me, that's the first question. I mean, do we want them? Do we don't want them? All right. And if that's the case, then there was a discussion of okay, if we're gonna bring out short-term rentals, then one of the former council members said, hey, we need to get this out in front of the public. All right. And let them have a voice in what it is that we're doing. So I'm trying to figure out basically where we stand right now. Okay. We are going to have them. We're not going to have them. We don't know what we're doing for sure. It's still up in the air, and I'm looking to you all for some guidance, right?
Okay. Well, we can certainly talk about that. So
Okay.
yeah, that's a good
I would
point.
appreciate it because,
Yeah.
like I said, when we left in October, it was, I don't want them in my, and some did, some didn't. So
Yeah.
I'd appreciate it just kind of understanding what direction we're heading, because when I listened to this evening, it sounds to me like the decision's already been made, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Yeah. Thank you.
So Paul, I'll kick it off. And thanks for providing that commentary. It's always nice hearing from citizens about the issues. Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but currently to have a short-term rental by code is a special use process, which is very cumbersome. And I'm not aware of any short-term rental, and there are several. There are not just a couple in Central Park. There are dozens operating in the city of any case that's come before this council or planning commission since I've been on council of any short-term rental.
That's correct.
So that the answer is there are short-term rentals in our community, and they're currently there's no code being enforced on them. So I've made this statement the day this came up as a case, and I'll make it again today. Our current policy is not great. And I think we need a better policy if we're going to allow it. We can talk about whether or not we don't want to allow it. I know John Welch actually specifically mentioned, do we just want to shut it down? And I think that night I asked Maria, can we legally just say that right now? Currently we have a special use process that we have to follow. And so I'm in favor of allowing them, but with a regulation. And so that's what we're talking about, is the details, ins and outs of a policy that would allow them in our city. If any HOA wants to restrict them further, that is their prerogative. Their membership can make those choices for those specific neighborhoods. And that's kind of all I'll say on that.
I did want to follow up with the first comment about other neighbors or that have concerns about problems. They don't have the ability to know how to contact the owner if it's happening in real time or whatever that is. Oh, unless they call the police department. But it just dawned on me that might, And I don't know because the research didn't specify the reasons why they put something in their code, just that it was in their code. But it might be that's why they put that on the website, because it has the address and the contact information of the property owner, where if you have issues, you could call. And so that might be one of the reasons why it made it into several codes, is that if you happen to live next door or there's any concerns, but I don't know what the why is behind the policies, just that they include certain things in their programs.
Well, there's a couple of things there. One is we certainly, by consensus of this body tonight, tell Paula and Maria to go and draft a code that makes these just outlawed. Okay. We certainly have that prerogative, or we can move forward with how we're going to manage this. And to the gentleman's question, I think that's an appropriate thing we do need to answer. Do we want to move forward with anything, or just say, okay, we're done with this and we want to make this change the city code so this is illegal in the city of Bel Aire? And so I mean, we're not going to take a formal vote on it because that would be a formal action based upon a proposed ordinance. But what would be the consensus here? Do we want to proceed this, or do we want to say we're done with this? So just kind of tell me your opinions, or tell us your opinions, not me.
I'll kick it off. I think it's pretty clear. I'm in favor of having a policy to manage and regulate short-term rentals. They're already in our community and there is a need for them. So I'm in favor of moving forward with drafting a policy.
Okay. All right, Mr. Proctor.
Yeah, Mayor, I think I'm really about the same. I don't think it serves us well to go outlawing a certain like these in particular for the whole city. But I do think if there's neighborhoods that they don't want it, that's up to HOA or whatever to determine that. I just want it streamlined because it could become very staff onerous.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Mayor.
Mr. McIntosh.
Yeah, I'm also of the opinion that, yeah, there's obviously a need for these. We have them, and I don't believe we as a city should just blanket outlaw a specific type of business.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. David.
Ditto all that. I think we give them direction to draft a policy.
Okay.
Well, I'll wrap it up. I appreciate the question, Mr. Craig, because it would be awfully easy to say, you know what, here's a real streamlined thing. Let's just not do these. And one thing I've learned on city council, in theory, I'm a hardcore, libertarian, do what you want. And even like last week with special use cases, that gets tougher when you're literally living feet from people. And so I think kind of the compromise there is we should allow them and allow people to exercise their property rights, but with some restrictions. And again, why I like the HOA, that option of if your neighborhood says this doesn't make sense for us, or this isn't what we want, you have a mechanism to go even further than we do. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
I think the consensus is pretty unanimous that we want to move forward with a policy. We don't want to just drop this. So I think I would ask you to go ahead and do that. Are there any other final closing comments that we need to make here before we move on to the next item? And do you feel like you have enough direction here?
I do.
Paula?
Thank you so much.
Very well. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you for all that information. And we'll now talk about the noise law. And I think our chief, Atterbury, is going to talk with us about how much noise we're making or not making, or whatever the case may be. I used to have one of those big woofer speakers, when I was a kid, and we'd blast the whole neighborhood with it, and nobody ever liked it.
Well, that would be a problem here.
Yeah,
We
there was
have
a
an
problem there
ordinance.
too.
Well, I thought what I would do is start off with the way things were versus the way things are now. About 10 years ago, we had a statute that we were able to use that said making unreasonable noise was a citable or arrestable offense. Here a few years ago, the Kansas Supreme Court didn't like a case that was in front of them, and they took part of that away from us. It was too vague because noise to Ms. Hamburg might not be noise to Mr. Dean, and it wasn't articulated well. So the statute was reworked, and that unreasonable noise was removed. So what we have now is something less than that, and it only includes fighting and disorderly or disturbing the peace, disturbing public gatherings, that type of thing. It's not just the noisy neighbor. What we have here in Bel Aire are a couple of different ordinances. One is a local provision. It is 6.2.5, and that's sound amplification prohibited. And that's mainly for neighborhoods. That's for somebody who cranks up the stereo at 2 o'clock in the morning. We dealt with one of those recently. We had a couple of fairly new folks out there, and they were looking in the uniform manual for the answer to their question of what to charge this young man with, and they couldn't find it. So they did the best thing they could. They tried to get him to quiet down, and they didn't take the wrong path with writing him for the wrong thing or trying to arrest him for the wrong charge. Then when they found out what the right charge was, after some research, and we educated them on how it was to be done, they went out and cited the man, and he appeared in court last week. So, but that has to do with sound amplification devices, so that if it's audible within 150 feet, it doesn't have to, you don't have to hear every word. Just if you can make out, that there's a tune, noise, heavy bass, it's citable. Okay, but that is only for amplification devices. And so it does not include non-amplified sound activity. You've heard a case before, some of you, about somebody doing paintless dent repair. Yeah, or somebody working on a car and revving the engine, or out at 2 o'clock in the morning hammering on a deck. Decide they can't sleep, so they're going to work on their deck, disturbing their neighbors. Our ordinance does not take care of that, but I'll hit on something that we can do a little later on. We also have a local provision for traffic, and that's again the sound amplification devices. That's the people who drive down the street with their stereos cranked up really loud, and we can cite those, and we've done that before. Same type of thing. If you can hear it from a distance of I think that one's less. I think it's 50 feet, which is essentially 3 cars bumper to bumper. So we can use those. So what we could do is look and work with Maria on maybe some modifications, because we want something that's legally defensible, that's easy for us to use, and we want it applicable. We want it to be useful for our community. Nobody wants to live next door to the person who's banging nails with a hammer at 2 o'clock in the morning or cranking their stereo up. So we could look at some other cities in the state of Kansas, and I've looked at Gardner, Leavenworth, Junction City. They all have really useful things that we could liberate from theirs and put into one for us. And I would maybe suggest in the future that we do that so that we can expand the toolbox that we have and make it useful for those situations that what we have is not useful now. Yeah, so any questions on noise?
Can you talk about the issue of, and I'm the same way before you were here, that we're having an issue with somebody next door, and you get on the phone with the police and you say, I have this issue, and they say, okay, we can go talk to them, but do you want to sign your name to a complaint? Can you
Very
talk
good.
about that issue?
Everything that we do, not everything, a lot of the things that we do, and this is one of them, we need a citizen complaint. It puts us in a real bad situation if we go out and try to get somebody to quiet down and they say, no, not gonna. You can't do anything about it. Because without a complaint, I can't make an arrest, not a legal one. So we really want to have that citizen complaint for something like this, a noise complaint. Yeah.
And there's nothing we can do from a law standpoint to make that go away. That's something you would always need is a complaint.
No matter what the
What we-
law is, because that's We have crimes that are committed against society. Say possession of marijuana, littering, any number of things. And we can use the city of Bel Aire society as the victim because somebody's wronged everybody around them, so to speak. This is the noise is bothering you, and you're the only one that can really sign that complaint. We really have to have that before we go into an enforcement mode, because without it, yeah, we can go talk to them, but if they don't comply and you're not going to sign the complaint, that stereo is going to stay up. And I don't have any enforcement ability to make them stop or make it stop. Any other questions on that? That went fast.
Chief, just real quick, you've broken up a lot of loud parties in your career, I imagine.
Oh, a couple. Yeah.
9 times out of 10, when you show up, the party's over usually.
Depends on what it is. Usually when you get called out to a party, there's some illegal activity going on besides just the noise, whether it's the underage drinking or drug use or, vandalism. You just have to be on the lookout for those other things that we can also enforce on. And then it turns into a negotiation, because I'm not obligated to make the arrest. I have discretion. I can exercise that discretion and not make an arrest if you make whatever that behavior is stop. And we do that a lot. Because what we try to do is educate before we enforce, but it doesn't keep us from enforcing without education if it's bad enough.
Yeah, Chief, thanks for working on these things. I was curious, it doesn't happen very often, but still occasionally it was 3 a.m., maybe a week or two ago, someone goes boom, boom, boom through the neighborhood. And, with all the video cameras that are out there, is that stuff that people can use to make a complaint on? But it might, I don't know
Sometimes.
what you'd need.
We prefer, I think the courts have let us stretch on-site arrest, and that's what it's called, by using cameras more and more. As technology improves, we're able to do that type of thing. I know that, for instance, with the speed zone cameras or the speed zone signs that you see, we're absolutely foreboding from writing somebody a citation off of one of those devices, even if it's calibrated just right. We have to see it ourselves, and there are criteria that we have to follow before we can write a ticket for speeding. We have to be able to hear the audible on the radar. We have to visually see it. We have to estimate the speed within 3 miles an hour of what we think it is. Then we have to confirm it on the radar. And then we also have to check to make sure our vehicle is calibrated with the unit. So a lot of things go into play. So I would not do that for that type of charge myself. But I can tell you that I myself, a couple of weeks ago, 6 o'clock in the morning, I came in early and I got in my car. I was going to go out and check something. And the guy in front of me just romps on it right here at Prestwick and 53rd, and he's got modified exhaust. I don't know if he still has modified exhaust, but he did. And it had to be every person in that stretch going west heard him go by. It was just so loud. So he got a ticket. So when the officers see it, hear it, sense it, they can enforce it.
Chief, just to clarify on that, this probably ends up being a repeat offender type deal. Like, the car, the driver, and you probably get 4 or 5 complaints of loud music, and then eventually you just end up
Hanging
nailing them.
around in the area. Yeah.
I assume that's your
And-
preferred method.
Yeah, you can do a lot of research and find that about 5 to 7% of our population causes 80% of our problem. And
And that's your job.
some people are hard learners. Our job is not to, arrest and do crazy things all the time. It's just to change behavior.
Right.
And that's why we write tickets or warnings. That's why we try to educate instead of enforce, is to try to change that behavior.
Well, I'll point one thing out about the speed zones. I mean, there's a reason, those are really educational, right?
That's the next part.
If a person drives, I know we are. If a person drives by and sees it, it's just more about information for them. Like, hey, just a reminder.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. I'll let you move forward to the next one.
Yeah.
It's a hot topic.
Which one is the next one? Is it speed?
Well, it is speed, but yeah, I didn't know if we were, I want to make sure we're done with the noise thing
Yeah.
first. Is there any other comments or questions?
Yeah, it's pretty we don't get as many complaints as you would think. We're getting more like in the apartments because that's a higher density location with people living close together, thinner walls, maybe not as much space. So I can move into to speed limits, and I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what we have here. And we have urban districts. Okay, so in the city of Bel Aire, our speed zones are urban based because we live in an urban environment. So we have 30-mile-an-hour speed zones in our residential areas, except for one, and that's between 48th Street and 45th, and from essentially Kruger and Baton to Oliver, and that's 25 mile an hour. That was created a long time ago. I don't know the reason behind it, but it's like any other area in our city that's 30 miles an hour. And then we have our other zones, more like your Oliver, your Woodlawn, 45th, 37th, that are 40-mile-an-hour zones. And then we have some 55-mile-an-hour zones out on Webb and Greenwich. We also have a 45-mile-an-hour zone from 45th to 53rd on Rock Road, and then from on 53rd Street between Webb and Greenwich, and that's in our industrial zone. So all of the speed limits are governed by state statute. Maximum zones or a maximum speed is allowed in those areas. And then, for instance, the 25-mile-an-hour zone had to be changed by the city, and cities can change what they like. Eastboro has 20 mile an hour through their city, as does Greensburg. A lot of their streets are 20-mile-an-hour streets. So to change a speed zone, you would do a traffic study. That's required. Ann and I met with Tim Azeri, with PEC last week, or it was last week, yeah. And we discussed a lot about what's required to change a speed limit in a city. And one of those things is a traffic study. And that's where they put out devices to measure the speed. And then you take the 85th percentile and decide if that's the proper speed. And Mr. Azier said that these days it's the speed study or the traffic study or the engineering judgment, because there are so many things that go into determining what the speed should be. The characteristics of the roadway come into play, whether it's paved, whether it's got curb and gutter. The recommended speed limit should be based on those things, whether you're going to have pedestrian traffic, whether or not there's a school involved. Maybe you've got a crash-prone location, like we'll talk about later with 53rd Street, some of the things that we've seen along there here lately. But then after the traffic study, you've got to look at whether or not it's going to be safe and good for the community. to change that speed limit. So most of the speed limits we have here are pretty standard. I know that Wichita has set speeds for different classifications of roadways. So if they build a road and it is a particular type of road, the speed is going to be X. So for any change in speed limit, you've got to do that traffic study. You've got to gather your data. You've got to have documented analysis, how you looked at that and how you examined it. And then you have to have your final decision and the rationale for why you made that decision. Because if it's wrong, somebody can bring that into question, and we'll need to justify it. So, any questions on any of that?
So Chief, is there a statutory recommendation or anything for residential speed limits?
Yes, it's set in the basic speed rule.
Okay,
And the basic speed rule for residential areas is 30 miles an hour.
30 miles an hour.
And that's
Okay.
In my notes here.
And what is that for thoroughfares? Do you have similar for thoroughfares? Like Woodlawn, Rock Road?
And I'm going to
those.
look to Ann. There's so many boulevards, thoroughfares. There's so many different classifications in the TCD.
Okay, so they can mix it all up.
Well, I think they're classified differently. Like a boulevard might be able to be 45 miles an hour, depending on the curb and gutter and how it's prepared.
I didn't see any, those recommendations are more in state statute, and I did not have a chance to go through the state
Okay.
statute. The MUTCD does reference the state statute, but typically around here, your arterial streets such as Woodlawn and Oliver in urban areas are generally 40 miles an hour.
All right, most of them are. That's true.
And the one you didn't ask, construction zones?
Make
Those
them
can
whatever
be
you want.
set by you or me in an emergency for a short period of time. And that's usually at 20 or 30 miles an hour in our urban environment here. That's what it'll be.
It's not a state statute. It's
It's in statute that we can do it, and then it's governed by the MUTCD as to what it should be based on the criteria, the type of street, its location, and what's going on the roadway that's requiring the construction zone determination.
Yeah, Chief, I know a few years ago, I remember Keachai made the change between 53rd and Highway 254. It used to be 55, and then they went down to, or was it
40.
50? It went down to
55.
40. And I know that was a little bit of a learning curve for folks, but that sort of, worked its way out.
They don't abide by it.
I do.
I do.
Just to be clear. But anyway,
about all
I
those
did
other
want to
people.
bring up a specific road, and I mean, you've highlighted it well, Rock Road. I've always been, and just tell me the history on that. I've always been kind of a little bit, why is it not 40? Why is it 45? It's narrower than most of our roads. There's been development along that road. And then I'm going to hop over one more. Webb Road is also a concern of mine. I mean, it's a 5-lane road, so people tend to want to drive faster anyway because it's wider and they feel safer, even though they're not. And there's a lot more truck traffic. So can you kind of tell us, I know I see the map, and can you tell us some of the history of Bel Aire and if there's been some pushes and pulls with people wanting to lower speed limits on certain roads, and kind of what your general feedback is on Rock Road between 45th and 53rd, and then Webb Road really from 45th to 254. What, I know we're going to talk specifically about 53rd later, so I've kind of left that off.
I can't give you a lot of history on it. It was all the way it is now when I got here.
Gotcha.
As for the rationale, and I'm going to glance over at Ann. She doesn't have to come back up. But one of the reasons why Rock Road may be 45 from 45th to 53rd is that, and the reason why it might not be 40 is because it doesn't have curb and gutter, which is considered a barrier. So with that curb and gutter, they would slow that down to 40 miles an hour. But since it's a smooth surface into a ditch, it can be a little faster. I can tell you, I don't understand a lot of the MUTCD and some of the rationales, but that's maybe a reason. Yeah.
So
I got a positive nod from Ann.
I'll just make one final comment. I generally would like to see more consistency across all of our arterials. I look at Rock as a major arterial street through our city. I think a lot of people use it, and a lot of people would feel the same way. I just assume it match the rest of our major arterial streets. That's just my opinion. And then as far as Webb, and I know you're going to talk about 53rd and our accidents lately, but I'd rather see all of our arterials the same speed, just for consistency and safety, so people aren't speeding up
Right.
at this, oh, I'm getting to 53rd, now I can gun it. I'd rather see us have more consistency with that, especially knowing that Webb, we're starting to see a lot of development along Webb. So there's a lot more traffic, there's a lot more turning movements and whatnot.
Well,
So
when Rock Road, I think I've got some history for you. I think when Rock Road was made a 45-mile-an-hour zone and hasn't been changed, there weren't drives into Old Mill on the east or west, Deer Run. So you didn't have a lot of access from side streets, and some of those have been built over the years, but the speed limit hasn't changed. And I don't know that it should by the rules in the manual, but I think that's what's changed is you have more access from side streets and neighborhoods than before, and that's going to be in that next discussion we have too.
I was just curious, did a council member bring this up? Is this just FYI leading into 53rd, or do you feel like we need to make any updates across? This is just Ted's.
So yeah, a citizen asked the questions. I left it out to the council, and a few council members would like to review it at least that I heard, and that's why I made it onto the workshop.
Well, personally, I have no problem with this standardizing to speed limits to 30 miles an hour residential and 40 miles an hour on the thoroughfares. But if we go with the traffic studies, I'm not sure that's beneficial. That's a lot of work, and I really kind of question the validity of them, because if you're saying 85 percentile in a traffic study, well, I tell you, whatever speed limit is, I'm going to be going that speed limit, so I'm going to hit that 85 percentile every time, and most everybody else probably will too. And so I just don't know what the validity of that traffic study was with the posted speed limit. If you pulled the speed limit away and see what they do, that might be a different story, but I'm not sure we want to go there. So
So I'm going to read you something that kind of has to do with what we just talked about. And that is state and local agencies should conduct a traffic study to reevaluate non-statutory speed limits on segments of the roadways that have undergone significant changes since the last review. Something we may want to do with our discussion on 53rd here in just a little bit.
so
Such
let's say
changes.
non-statutory limits.
Mhm.
So the statutory limits for these type of roads is 40, but the non-limit is 45 at a Rock Road between 45th and 53rd. Is that correct? Is that a correct interpretation of that statement?
I don't know that it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the MUTCD is a huge book, 900 pages plus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's got a lot of stuff.
Somebody needs to go do some research there. Not me. It's not my world.
So if you're looking at roadway context, the addition or elimination of parking driveways, changes in the number of travel lanes, changes in the configuration of bicycle lanes, changes in road geometrics, signals, coordination, significant changes in traffic volumes. That's when you want to consider maybe changing faster or slower, but that's why you have to have the traffic study.
So what that all boils down to is there's been a lot of changes in both 45th or in both Rock Road and Webb Road since these speed limits were put in place, which is way before my time, before Chief's time. So if the council's concerned and asking for, consistency, this is a very good time to take another look at these speed limits. And there's a lot of engineering judgment that goes into it, the feel of the road, the geometrics. There's a lot of side streets now. We've got, 53rd that we just paved. There's a ton of residences that access
just
that
before.
road.
Mhm.
That's a very drastically different characteristic than there was 10 years ago.
I would even add the danger of two people highway.
Yes.
We have a couple stretches that are 55 miles an hour, and we see numerous accidents. I would stretch that's local knowledge. Of
Right.
the road that maybe doesn't need to be 55, maybe it needs to be lower.
Right.
So people have more time to stop.
Is your microphone on? He said
Sorry.
on.
No, so like 254 highway, that's a local knowledge thing. That's an engineering judgment thing. Like we've got stretches of road that are volumes are increasing. I don't need a study. I know it. Now the study will confirm what we already know. There are stretches of highway or stretches of the road on Rock, Webb, Greenwich that are leading up to a very dangerous on-grade intersection. Now, yes, we know and hope and pray that soon some of those will be interchanges, but we already know those are problems now, and they're not going to get better as we develop and add more cars and more trucks. So I do think, I agree, it is a great time to analyze it. And I would guess that we're needing a traffic study probably just for our own data in the next year or so to fund some of our, or to deal with some of our development questions that we're having. So
And while there is the allowance for the use of engineering judgment to raise or lower the speed limits, as a liability standpoint, it's really good to
Study.
have that engineering study behind you, to have that hard data to back up whatever decisions do end up being made.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is this something we would tack on to PEC's consulting, or is it more intense than that?
This is something that we certainly could. Tim said that a traffic study for this type of occurrence would be between $10,000 and $12,000. However, just going out and taking traffic counts that also do speed counts, that's about $2,000 a location. So that the traffic study puts in all the extra analysis, and that includes the per location. And if we do want to move forward with this, we would request specific costs. We would have a very specific scope on what areas need to be studied and where. And we would ask PEC to put together a work order under their master services agreement. There are many other, as a open point, there are many other firms that also do that work too. So if we wanted to go out and get other bids, we could certainly do that.
And the fun part about this discussion is because Ann and I have had this in the last few weeks, because we have, WAMPO open projects coming up, and typically we rank 1 to 7. It'd be nice to kind of have some traffic counts for that ranking, just some science behind it versus, someone driving Rock Road one day and saying, "Oh, we got to get Rock number 1." Well, how much data do we have on that? What you also notice is all vans prices are kind of under my authority. So it's one of those things, but I'd like some of your guys' feedback, because it's something that I can sign off on, have it ready for you when we do talk WAMPO priorities, as well as if we want to talk about changing speed limits. Something that cost maybe doesn't bring in front of the council. A lot of those things are judgment calls on mine, and I get a lot of input from these types of discussions, whether or not to go forward with this type of thing.
So Ted, one follow up to that. So I know when the Integra piece was at play, we did do a traffic study. It's been a couple of years ago. And I know KDOT at that time said, yeah, go ahead and do it. That'll be a part of your match. KDOT's in their discovery design phase, so they're going to be doing traffic studies anyway. I don't know if it's something we can visit with them and coordinate on.
Already ahead of
Okay.
you. Yep.
Great.
They're going to release that data to us to supplement some of but they're not, of course, they're not going
Just-
all the way to the 45th.
Right.
So that would be where like our traffic studies supplement KDOT's
Right.
But,
traffic study.
but USD 259 also did a traffic study that we should
Along Woodlawn.
or
Yep.
Verizon.
grab a hold of
Yep.
as well.
And that one's a little dated too. But
And I think that's
we got
kind of what
data.
went into Ann's, it's like, was it $2,000 for intersection? Of course, we went and do Woodlawn and 53rd because we already have
Already got
good
that.
data sets, but we'd
Mhm.
probably want to do maybe Webb and 45th or a Rock and 45th because we haven't had that in a while, and it'd be nice to get those traffic studies. So it'd be more strategic deployment of this to give you a holistic vision of what our traffic's doing in our city.
Mr. Proctor?
Mr. Mayor, yep. So as I look at this, when I take my kids over to Circle Greenwich Elementary and we're going down 45th Street and we're crossing Webb, I mean, we're in a car together, and I feel like we're doing Frogger. I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's like nope,
It's a challenge.
no,
I agree.
how's it gonna go? So yeah, those two intersections, that being 55, I think in not a stop sign, not a stoplight, anything like that. And especially with our prerogative as a city of wanting to be a walkable, bikeable city, I can't imagine how that must feel on a bike or like trying to run or something. I see people up and down Rock Road between 45th and 53rd, and then even up north of 53rd from those apartments walking alongside Rock Road. And I'm like, hey,
It's not safe.
no, it's not. We got to do something about that. And so and as we build out this industrial district, there's surely going to be some people who live in this neighborhood who'd like to be able to walk or bike to work. So I don't know, when we look at putting more infrastructure in those intersections, if it's lights or crosswalks or whatever, but you know.
Yep. And we're kind of bleeding into the next conversation, but there's discussions. There's an economic development grant from KDOT that they have that's really good program to help us with some of our intersections, especially 53rd and Webb. But that's probably going to be a year or two, a few years out, because I'll have to apply and we'll have to show. But we're already thinking as a staff, what we can do to
It's gonna
improve
be a
those
huge intersection.
as we
$5 million.
as we
project,
go. Yeah, it's we're going to need some help with KDOT and grants and all that stuff.
I can tell you with 45th and Webb, the big problem is probably the southbound traffic because they're 55 slowing to 45, later on slowing to 40. It graduates down. So as they go into that 45 zone, they're still doing 55 plus. The people usually who are going northbound are coming out of the 40, 45 mile an hour zone. Their speed is slower and they're speeding up. So you've got those two dynamics happening at the same time. And during rush hour, that is not the place to be going east and west.
Quick question. Are all those roads on the map ours? Like like Rock Road along Keachai, north of 53rd? Do we not share that with Keachai? Is that all ours? Rock Road, north of 53rd, the 55 mile an hour one. Oh,
That's something else.
Starlink's good too. Just the one that borders Keachai.
There it is.
I forgot
Is-
his mirror me. I was looking.
Okay.
The Rock Road stretch that borders Keachai, is that all ours and our prerogative to change or not?
We can change northbound, but not the south.
North of 53rd on Rock Road.
Yes,
The red line.
yes.
We don't have to. That's Keachai. That's our road.
No, that's our road. Where we share road primarily is on Oliver, south of 254, the railroad tracks, south to 53rd Street. We actually have the northbound lane. They have the southbound lane to 53rd. So that's a little messy. There's another point along 53rd Street in between Woodlawn, Oliver and Woodlawn.
Who's in control?
He is. It's okay. By the
There it
pump
is. There you go.
station. There you go. Okay. By the pump station, that little brown area right here. Let's see. From right here to right here, Keachai actually comes across the road. And they actually have a portion of that road. And I know Ty was trying to work with John on that when he was here. Like, I can't write a ticket there. It's not ours. We improved it, but it's not ours. So that's one other area. As far as the other roads, the only other area where we actually share a road is out on 123rd, out that little edge right on the far right side. We share that with the county.
Surprised we're still doing that.
Well, that's from decades ago.
Well, I know, but last year, year before last, they came up with they came up with several of those roads.
Be in
that
the
were
next
shared.
round
They
now.
said, No more.
Is that a quarter mile that they?
Okay.
Any other questions about the speed zones, et cetera? I think my personal opinion, most of them are about where they should be. When we do improvements on Rock Road from 45th to 53rd, we're probably going to need to look at it then. And that probably, my opinion, that needs to be at some point, because exactly right, we're getting a lot more, especially summertime traffic, foot traffic. People are going to the Quick Trip, coming back, and they're having to walk in the ditch or along the side of the road. And sometimes they do it late at night and they don't wear reflective clothing, and it's bad. That 25-mile-an-hour zone, again, I don't know why it's 25 miles an hour. It's just like every other neighborhood in our city. So at some point, somebody decided that was going to be changed, and it's still that way. Our 30-mile-an-hour zones, we get complaints in a lot of the 30-mile-an-hour zones because people think that folks are driving 50 because they're standing out by the curb and they see them go by at 30. And we'll go out and run radar for hours and catch people at 31, 33. And I can tell you, when you're standing next to the road, next to the traffic, it really feels like people are going fast. But it's not necessarily so.
Is there any, sorry.
I was actually going to ask a clarifying question. On the roads that are 25, if that's under the state statute, do we have to do a traffic study if we were so inclined to increase it to 30 and make it uniform?
I believe you would, to change it from 25 to 30. It took council action to make it 25 from 30.
And honestly, that's kind of a question for Maria. Yes and no. You can do a traffic study. You can also use engineering judgment, as myself or Tim or another professional traffic engineer, and just say, hey, this is the exact same characteristics as everything else. There's no reason for it to be 25 that we're seeing, so let's raise it to 30. Really, it's just the liability. As long as there's some sort of justification that you have for changing the speed limit, raising it up to 30, while not a drastic change, it does meet the rest of the characteristics of the neighborhood and the surrounding area. I don't think it would be that big of a deal as long as there's a justification somewhere, but that you may want to get Maria's advice on that.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious if the traffic study is needed when it's really anything aside from what's recommended from the standard code and limits and all that stuff. But yeah, if we're just going to what the standards are, if we're fine.
Right. I personally don't see an issue. It's just more of the liability aspect. If somebody were to get in an accident and come yell at the city because, well, it was 25, now that it's 30, well, my child got injured. And it's just that, it's really just that liability aspect of it where, I would suggest that you just seek additional
I'm a little bit
advice.
curious. Has anybody ever taken the time to go back into the city council record and see what the justification for lowering it to 25 was. And I realized that probably 20, 30 years ago, but I think it would be good to know that, because if we find that they made it just an arbitrary decision without any data to support it, maybe we are much more to Mr. Proctor's point, on firmer ground to just bringing it back to 30. You know, now if they had a study,
Have not.
then that'd be something that
Yeah.
I would suggest this, we need to know that.
I was going to make a comment just about that. I live over there by Kruger. My understanding was when I brought that up a few years ago, talking to Ty, I think it was just somebody in the area complained enough, and it might have just been council action at some point that did it. And so, because I know when we had Deer Run folks in here, it's like, well, how do we tell Deer Run people they can't lower their speed limit when these people did? So there's the political angle there. I think it should be uniform, but on the other hand, I'm like you said, I'm not sure who those people are still around or not that would throw a fit if we raised it or not. So
That's something that Ted can easily have staff take the time and go through and
Yeah. And,
see if we can find those.
and I've noted it, and Chief kind of, we are mill and overlaying rock this summer. That might be a good time to look at all these changes and give staff enough time to research what's all needed and traffic studies, and then maybe we have something before council around that time, I'm thinking.
I'm not saying it has to be 30, but it's inconsistent with the nature of the rest of our neighborhoods.
I agree. I think it's kind of odd.
And to Mr. Dean, I drive them almost every day. To me, now they seem normal at the speeds they are. Even Webb and Greenwich, maybe some more signage as we approach 254. But as far as the speed in that semi-rural, especially Greenwich, and then the 4-lane road at Webb, it just seems appropriate at 55. Now, I do question between 53rd and 254 on Rock. It just seems a little out of place, especially with the increased traffic from the school and the apartment complex when it went in. So,
Yeah, I'm also kind of projecting when I think about that, Chief. I know you drive the roads every day. I'm projecting more. We have all these new buildings going in that are going to start having a lot more truck traffic. And like you said, it's already Frogger at that intersection. It's like not going to get better. So I don't know. I don't know necessarily the answer, but I'd like to see uniformity. And I think lowering the speed would actually probably create a safer situation. That's my opinion.
are we ready for 53rd Street?
I think we're ready.
I'm not sure what you want to hear about 53rd.
Well, you give this chart here that shows a dramatic increase in accidents last year and along all several intersections, not all of them.
Yeah. Okay.
You
All right.
didn't do 53rd and Rock, but you did Webb, Woodlawn, and Oliver.
So this is one of those areas where I think that paragraph that I read about the change in the characteristics and the number of drives, the number of people who use the road, et cetera, has really impacted us over the last couple of years. Yeah. Just the nature of the road itself. And you can see from 2025, if you look back to 2022, it was bad, but it was not bad in those areas along 53rd. We had some accidents, but nothing like we had this past year. And I can tell you, we've already had a couple of wrecks at Webb and 53rd already this year. So I think when we did 53rd and Rock Road, and we put the blinking signs up, I didn't know that was going to work. And I've told the mayor, Ali Crow, it worked. It really solved a problem. I don't know, and that's part of a traffic study that we could engage in. Do we do the same at Woodlawn and Oliver? And I just throw that up in the air, just as something to think about, because we do have the increased traffic, and we have had 39% increase in crashes overall. But looking at those percentage increases at those three intersections, that's huge.
Chief,
And those aren't without injuries. Those are injury crashes. So
just to clarify, you're saying going from a two-way flashing to a four-way flashing stop, just to clarify what you're
Yep.
saying. At
and
Oliver and
I
Woodlawn.
personally, I don't like it. But if it's for the safety of our citizens or people who just traverse through our city, so they can do so without fear of, getting in a crash at those intersections.
Well, so I'll add a couple of notes to that. So first, I've seen two of those accidents at Oliver, and they shut the road down. Like the road was completely shut down, and they looked very bad. With the adding of the bike multi-use path along 53rd that will connect bike lanes on Oliver, will connect to school. The discussions of doing an improved crossing at this location. We may or may not go to 3 lanes depending on how we restripe when we do Woodlawn. I would be in favor of strongly considering a 4-way stop at least Woodlawn, but maybe Oliver as well for all those reasons. Because again, it reduces traffic. People have to slow, or the speed. People have to slow down, have to look. I agree. I was a little bit skeptical when we first did that at 53rd and Rock that it wouldn't have much of an impact going to a 4-way. But I drive through that a lot, and I have been surprised.
Rarely do we have a crash at Rock.
I mean, I just want to throw those other thoughts out there of things we're currently working on. The school, we're going to have a crosswalk there.
Yeah.
So it worries me a little bit that we're going to have a crosswalk at Woodlawn and we don't have a 4-way stop. Like that kind of freaks me out a little bit, to be honest. And so I just wanted to throw that up. There's a lot of other things connecting besides just the crashes you're seeing now. Additional use, kids, bikes. So
I don't see that it's going to reduce a lot. Now, what we've done is we've made a couple of improvements. We put the cross traffic doesn't stop.
Right.
But if you'll go out and look, just sit and watch those intersections where the stop sign is, people go past the stop sign to look north and south. It's like they see the stop sign, they know they have to stop, most of them, and they come to a stop at either the B pillar or they drive all the way past it and then wait for their turn to go. So they don't get that reminder that cross traffic doesn't stop, because almost 100% of the crashes that are out there are not people who just drive through the stop sign. They come to a stop and they drive out into the path of a car or into the side of a car. So they're in a hurry. I don't know what, but we've seen this increase over the past year. And that is hand in hand with, over the last couple of years, the increase in the population of people who live along 53rd and use that as their egress and regress from home.
So just a device I've seen used, particularly because one of my sons lives out west side of Wichita along 119th Street. As you approach 37th Street, they have flashing warning signs that there's an intersection there. Now, it's not a stop sign. They don't stop along 119th. They just have to stop at 37th. It has a flashing stop sign, but they have a flashing warning sign that there's an intersection there, because it's not always really readily obvious that there is, the way just the dynamics of the area. I don't know if one of those would make sense here, and I don't know how much we're talking about cost-wise for a sign like that.
That's where the traffic study comes into play,
Mm-hmm.
to get both of those intersections, especially those two, Webb Road also, because we've had a lot of crashes at Webb, but have those studied so that we can have that support to make the positive changes that need to be made so that people aren't getting hurt.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of curious, does it take a full traffic study to put in a 4-way stop, or, what's the expense burden of putting in a 4-way stop?
Well, the lighted stop signs are about $2,500 a piece, but, and again, Ollie Crow, they seem to have worked at 53rd and Rock.
Oliver, you mean? 53rd and Oliver? or at Rock?
Rock.
Okay.
Yeah.
You did a four-way stop at Rock,
The
but at
four-way
Oliver, you
stop.
put you put flashing lights.
And people are
two-way.
still crashing.
And it's still crashing. Okay.
Yet to be determined, but.
Does be determined to crash or no?
We just installed this flashing light a month ago, but
Oh,
I
okay.
imagine there's been a crash since the flashing light. That's why
Okay.
Chief said that, but
Okay.
So, Mr. Proctor, we actually just asked Timajir that same question, and he said that what you were wanting to do, the four-way stop, you really don't need a traffic study. However, it gives you the justification if there's any issues that come up. So, yes and no. I mean, it's having that extra documentation, that's your safety net.
If we want a signal, that requires.
A signal, I would not put that in without a traffic study.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're
Okay.
talking about $1
So we
million.
can't point to 350%, 900%, 250% increases in crashes. We need
That's-
more.
That's part of the justification, yes.
Yes.
The other thing that goes hand in hand with that is if you do make it, we'll do the same thing that we did out here. And that is we put up signs telling the public ahead of time and at the time that there is now a stop sign in place because, and then we also put flags up on the new stop signs to draw attention to them because people get used to driving and there's not a stop sign there in their head, even though you put signage up
Right.
that says there is. So we sat out there for days and stopped people and pointed it out to them. We didn't write tickets, but we pointed it out to them that, hey, there's a stop sign there and you got to do it. So
So I'd like us to take a look at that transit study of Woodlawn and 53rd of a few years ago. And I know the school board's also done a study since then and see if their recommendations were for an interim stop sign at that intersection. I don't remember that there were. I remember the transit study said put a roundabout there, but I don't know. I haven't looked at this 259 study. I don't know what it says.
We can get a hold of that
Mhm.
and then take a look at it.
Okay, great.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. McIntosh.
Chief, you said that most people who stop at the 53rd stop sign pull past the stop sign in order to look north and south at all stop signs. Okay. Is there a visibility problem? Are they just not like, is there foliage in the way that we need to trim back or?
It's
if
the
you
elevation
stop at
change.
53rd and Woodlawn, yeah, there's a little bit of an incline, which is not as bad as it used to be. When the road was reworked, we
Yeah.
leveled that out a little bit, so it's not as steep as it was. So people can see from the stop sign, you can see better. Now, the statute says you have to stop at the stop sign, and after you come to a complete stop, you move forward so that if you need to check the other directions, you can do so, and then you can proceed safely. A lot of people get confused when we write them tickets for, they stopped at the stop sign, then they crashed into somebody, because the second half of that statute says that then you can pull forward, look to make sure it's clear. And if it's clear and nobody's coming in to be a hazard inside the intersection, you can go through. And we've written so many of those too. Well, almost all of those. We've written that ticket too.
Well, not to have us go back and do another study, but I think I have noticed with several of our stop signs, it's not 100%, there's several of them, they stop signs seem to be way too far back from the intersection. And it just forces you to have to go beyond the stop sign to see. Oliver and 45th is a classic example. I think every direction of that intersection, the stop sign and the stop bars are way too far off the intersection to you're going to have people run through those all the time just because of that. So I think as we look at doing those things, we should look at what's the right placement of that stop sign.
I know with traffic study that was done in K254, one of the recommendations was because they went out with stopwatches and if somebody does stop
They
at the stop
standardize them.
sign, there was an increased time to get to the intersection and then make the crossing. And during that time, they've misjudged how close a car is coming at 70 miles an hour. So we were having crashes. And I don't know that that's the same problem we're having now,
I'm not saying it is.
but
on-
to move them closer,
Yeah.
like 45th and Oliver's a perfect example because they're 30 some feet, maybe more away from the intersection proper.
They're quite a distance, yeah.
And
At least
problem
one
too
car
is
length, maybe
one of
two.
them on the west side is actually in Wichita.
Right.
So I
yeah,
can't write anybody for running that stop
Right,
sign.
right.
Uh,
I get it.
And
yeah.
the same's true for 53rd Street.
Yes.
It's about that far into.
Well, we got a roundabout coming
So-
at that one, so.
So what KDOT did along 254 is they made them standardize the distance of all those stop signs. I don't know what that distance was, but they told them
Much closer.
we need to move them all
Yeah.
because some of them were like a half block off and some of them were like way too far into the intersection. And so there was no standard. So they told all the communities along 254 to standardize that, and they set that standard. I don't know what it was, but they set the standard. So
And they also use that cross traffic doesn't stop
Yeah.
on the wide median,
Right,
wide
they do.
medians where they have stop signs.
right. Yeah.
Present, right.
Mhm.
A lot of good things they did on 254. We've tried to do some of them here at especially Woodlawn and Oliver. Not much success.
Like I mentioned, Ted, I mean, to me, if we can get without a full-blown study or something really expensive, four-way stop seems to make a ton of sense because you don't have Rock and 53rd on this list. One other question I had was, yeah, and so it's been, like you said, effective. And so I would be in favor of that, even though, it won't be fun to stop there. The other issue is I drive east in the morning between Oliver and 53rd, and sometimes it's hard to find a hole there by Isley and with the sun in your eyes. That'd be valuable there as well. Last question would be, what about speed? Now that 53rd's not full of potholes and not a dirt road, is there any issue you think where I can just be going along and easily get to 52 and have to slow it down now that the road's redone? Is speed any of a factor, you think?
It's not with crashes.
Okay.
We've only had one, I think, in that stretch, and then one in between Rock and Webb. And it's the same thing. Somebody stopped at a stop sign and then just pulled out in front of somebody.
I'd say on that stretch, just to kind of tag on to that, it's so hilly
Yeah.
that, and there are people, because there's no sidewalk yet, using the shoulders, which is nice because we have shoulders, but people are
Scares me.
using them to walk their dogs. And that can be very dangerous because there's a car right next to them.
So
I've had that issue coming over a hill and somebody like almost
Yeah.
out in the road. And we haven't had accidents, but probably close calls.
right. So it's very frequent that you can find somebody doing 55 or more along there. And it was bad enough because people were doing 60 plus in the
100
beginning.
plus.
And what I had Public Works do is install 2 new 40-mile-an-hour signs right at the top of the hill. And so they're reminded halfway through what the speed is. It doesn't work.
They make a difference.
Yeah.
Have you guys done warnings and things like that? I recall you did,
Pretty much write tickets now.
okay.
I mean, that stuff's been there. That's been there for a long time. Yeah, I leave it up to the officers whether they write a warning or a citation.
But you're running radar there on a regular basis with all that development. Okay, thank you.
One of our problems is if we can be present every now and then, you see the emergency lights, slow some people down because they don't know when we're going to be there and if they're next. And that's what I talked about earlier, change in behavior. Sometimes it's not pleasant, but sometimes that passive for them activity, seeing the lights, seeing us sitting there, it can help them remember to drive the speed limit.
So the conclusion here is we need more traffic study. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit about KDOT grant we received? That'll be helpful in the short term. Again, everything goes back to K254 when you have a problem, short-term solutions, and then as we study these, we'll develop longer term.
So we did receive a grant from KDOT. It's called the High Risk Urban Roads. And what it's intended for is enhancing the marking and the signage at high-risk urban roads. So I think I know we got 53rd and Oliver, I believe 53rd and Woodlawn, and 53rd and Webb. And what it does is it provides brand new stop signs, one for each side of the road. So for a two-way stop, we get 4, one for the left, one for the right, one for the left, one for the right on the other side. They also give us thermoplastic tape that the Public Works guys will go out and install with a heat gun. This is something that needs to be maintained for 2 years. And it's intended to enhance safety, enhance warning, say, hey, drivers, hello. So there is that's coming too. We should have a contract for that. I'm assuming in February is kind of what I'd heard. So you'll probably see that late February, early March. There is zero cost. No, there's a 20% match, I believe. I can't remember. There's very negligible cost associated with it. It may be zero, but I haven't looked at it in a little while. And it's a very good program, very little cost to the city. Hopefully it's going to improve some things. If the city does choose to move forward with converting some of these intersections to 4-way stops, I will get back in touch with the program folks and we'll get those changed and revised to do what we need to do. And whether we're trading out materials to get this, if we put in the stop signs, maybe they give us more tape or something, we'll get it worked out.
And does rumble strips qualify for any of those intersections? I know that's what they've done on K254 in some of the communities is put rumble strips leading up to 254. Obviously, that wouldn't work at the intersections you're talking about, but more towards approaching the highway.
And I don't believe that was part of this high-risk urban roads program.
Right. It was a different.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a big difference when you're approaching a road that has a
Sure.
70-mile-an-hour speed limit versus a 40, 45, 50-mile-an-hour
Right.
speed limit. Yeah. Do you know how much that grant was for?
Sorry?
How many dollars was the grant?
It's been a while since I looked at it, but it was in the 6 figures.
Oh, okay.
I was very surprised to see how much everything added up to be.
And would it cover traffic study work?
This one does not, unfortunately. There is, KDOT does have a program,
Asking.
TEAP, T-E-A-P, and I don't remember what it stands for. They do actually provide traffic studies for free, but it takes about a year to get it done. We had mentioned that with Tim, and Tim's like, you could, but your need is now. Your need is not a year into the future. And he didn't think that would tell us what we didn't already know. So.
Yeah, because for each of these wrecks, we're talking about, we got injuries, medical, you're taking residents out of work, it's property damage on both sides. They're very costly.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of impacts for sure. I'm sure Chief loves working accidents too. There's his favorite thing to do. Not.
Is there anything else we need to talk about here? Any more comments or questions?
I just have a quick announcement. In our ordinance, we need to have a PBC and a land bank meeting in January. So we're going to postpone council pictures to February meeting. And at 6:45, we're going to have to hold a land bank meeting with the council. So next Tuesday, of course, we'll post it on the agenda and everything. Really what it is just once a year, we have to establish our inventory, which there's zero inventory. Well,
We got those
there's
6
some,
acres.
but it's really just gavel in, approve the inventory, gavel out. So it usually takes 5 minutes. So that's something that we'll do before next council meeting instead of pictures. So just giving you a
So
heads
we're
up.
going to do that on the 20th
The
of
20th, yep.
January.
January 20th.
Okay.
Yep.
Still arriving 30 minutes early. before that.
No, just 6:45. So
Unless you're on the PBC.
unless you're on the
You're
PBC,
not,
which
but
I
Tyler and I
yeah,
are.
yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. PBC stands for Public Building Commission, in case you're wondering what those, we're throwing these new abbreviations at you. So, no, it isn't pipe. So, Okay. If there's nothing else to talk about, I guess we'll be adjourned and we'll see everybody in a week. Have a good night.